Everyone at Voss Architecture knew two things about Daniel Yu. First, he was the best personal assistant in the entire building, maybe in the entire city. Second, he was completely, hopelessly, silently in love with his boss. Daniel had worked for Kian Voss for exactly 4 years, 3 months, and 11 days. He knew this because he had never stopped counting. It was one of those small, quiet things he did, like remembering Kian's coffee order: black, 2 sugars, no milk, always too hot, or knowing that Kian got headaches when he skipped lunch, or understanding that when Kian went quiet during a meeting, it meant he was not bored but thinking very hard. Daniel knew everything about Kian, and Kian, for all his brilliance, knew almost nothing real about Daniel. That was the deal. That was how it worked. The morning it all started to fall apart was a Tuesday. Daniel arrived at the office at 7:45, 15 minutes before Kian. He placed the coffee on the desk, he sorted the emails. He moved the 9 o'clock meeting to 9:30 because he had already checked that the client's train was delayed. He did all of this before Kian even walked through the door. When Kian did arrive, he did not say good morning. He dropped his bag on the chair, loosened his tie, and said, "Daniel, I need you to clear my schedule for Friday evening." Daniel looked up from his screen. "The Harlow dinner is on Friday. Cancel it." "Mr. Harlow has been waiting 3 weeks for that." I said cancel it. Kian was not being rude. He never was. His voice was just flat and final, the way it got when something else was taking up all the space in his head. He ran a hand through his dark hair and looked out the tall, glass window at the city below. Something important came up. Daniel typed the cancellation email without another word. He told himself it did not hurt. He had been telling himself that for 4 years. Kian Voss was 32 years old and looked like he had been built from a design sketch. Tall, sharp-jawed, always in a well-fitted shirt. He had this way of walking into a room that made people pay attention, not because he tried, but because he simply could not help it. He was focused and driven, and sometimes cold, in a way that confused people who did not know him. Daniel knew him. Daniel knew that the coldness was not real. It was armor. Kian had grown up proving himself, first to a father who thought architecture was not a serious career, then to a world that kept testing whether he deserved to be at the top. The focused, unreadable face was something he had built, piece by piece, over years. Daniel had watched him build it, and that was maybe the most painful part. He had been there for the early chaos, the late nights drafting proposals, the weeks when Kian survived on instant noodles and stubbornness, the pitch that almost failed and then did not. Daniel had been the one who printed the final deck, who ordered the food, who texted back the clients when Kian fell asleep at his desk. And slowly, without meaning to, Daniel had fallen. Not like a scene from a movie. Not in one big moment. It happened the way water finds its way into stone, slow, quiet, unstoppable. One day, Kian laughed at something Daniel said, a real laugh, surprised out of him, and Daniel thought, oh no. Another day, Kian looked tired, and Daniel wanted to reach across the desk and just fix it somehow. And he thought, oh no, this is bad. And then the wanting became a constant background noise, something Daniel carried around inside his chest every single day. He never said anything. He was good at not saying things. He was also, it turned out, very bad at leaving. That evening, after the office emptied and Kian had gone home, Daniel stayed behind to finish the rescheduling. The lights were low. The city hummed beyond the glass. He sat at his desk and did what he always did when it got too quiet. He made a list of reasons to stay. The job was good, the pay was fair, he was useful here. Then he made a list of reasons to go. He stopped after the first one, because the first one was enough. Because I am disappearing, he had not noticed it happening. But somewhere over 4 years, Daniel had become so good at being what Kian needed that he had almost forgotten what he himself wanted. He ate when Kian was busy. He rested when Kian rested. He organized his whole life around a person who did not even know his favorite color. He closed his laptop. He did not leave, not that night. But the thought had been born, and thoughts like that do not die easily. He picked up his coat. He turned off his desk lamp. He walked to the elevator. And in the soft hum of the ride down, Daniel Yu, for the first time in 4 years, let himself ask a question he had been avoiding since the very beginning. What would happen if I just stopped? The elevator doors opened. He stepped out into the night. He did not yet know the answer. but he was starting to want one. The Friday that Kian had cleared so carefully turned out to be about a person. Her name was Seo Rina. She was a gallery owner, tall and elegant, with a clean sense of style and a warm, easy laugh. She had known Kian for 2 years through a mutual friend, and somewhere in those 2 years, something had shifted between them. Daniel found out the way he always found out about things, not because Kian told him, but because Kian asked him to do something. This time it was book a table at Lucerne for 8 o'clock. Private room if possible, and order flowers, white ones. Daniel booked the table. He ordered the flowers. He confirmed the reservation, arranged the car, and reminded Kian twice about the time. He did all of this with a steady hand and a face that gave nothing away. Inside, it was a different story. He had known, of course, that Kian dated. He was not naive. Kian was charming in that understated way that certain people are. Not loud about it, not trying, just naturally magnetic. There had been other names over the years, other dinners. Daniel had booked them all, but this one felt different. He could not explain why. Maybe it was the way Kian had said something important came up, not someone something. Like this mattered in a way that was bigger than the usual. Or maybe it was the white flowers. Kian had never asked for flowers before, not once in 4 years. Daniel put the receipt in the expense folder and closed the drawer. He ate his lunch alone at his desk that day, which was not unusual. What was unusual was that he could not taste anything. A week later, Kian came into the office on a Monday morning and set his bag down differently. There was something lighter about him, something that sat in his shoulders instead of pulling them down. He smiled at Daniel before he even said anything. And it was a real smile, not the polite professional version. Good morning, Kian said. Daniel blinked. In 4 years, Kian had said good morning maybe 40 times. Daniel had counted those too. Good morning, Daniel said back. Your 9 o'clock called ahead. They are running 5 minutes late. That is fine. Kian sat down, pulled up his screen, and then looked over at Daniel in that rare way he sometimes did, like he was actually seeing him, not just using him. You look tired. I am fine. You have been staying late. There is a lot to catch up on after the Harlow rescheduling. Kian nodded slowly, but he kept looking. And Daniel, who had spent years being looked at without being seen, suddenly felt deeply uncomfortable under that gaze. Take a long lunch today, Kian said finally. That is not a suggestion. Daniel opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. All right. He did not take a long lunch, he took a normal lunch. But he spent the whole time sitting in the small park 2 blocks from the office, watching pigeons and thinking about nothing and everything at the same time. Her name came up properly 2 weeks later. Kian was on the phone in his office, door slightly open, and Daniel was not listening. He was reviewing contracts, his headphones around his neck, the sound of Kian's voice just background noise. Then he heard the laugh. It was that laugh, the surprised real one, the one Daniel had catalogued on a shelf in his memory and taken out sometimes when things felt very bleak. Kian was using it for someone else. Daniel put his headphones on. He turned the volume up. He read the same contract line 4 times without understanding any of it. When Kian came out of his office 20 minutes later, he was still smiling slightly, and he said, I am going to need next Saturday blocked off completely. Personal. Of course, Daniel said. And next Sunday morning, too. Done. Kian picked up his coffee, paused. Thank you, Daniel. Seriously, I do not say that enough. And those 6 words said with such easy sincerity, nearly broke Daniel completely. Because that was the thing about Kian. He was not a cruel person. He was not careless on purpose. He just did not know. And Daniel had made very sure of that. It is my job, Daniel said. Kian looked at him for one moment too long, then nodded and walked back into his office. Daniel turned back to his screen. He told himself it was fine. He had been telling himself that for 4 years, 3 months, and 25 days, he was running out of ways to believe it. The first crack appeared the following Thursday. Daniel was filing the weekend itinerary. He had booked a hotel stay upstate, breakfast reservation included, 2 guests, when Kian stopped by his desk and said, without looking up from his phone, By the way, I may have some news soon. Good news. I wanted you to hear it from me first. Daniel looked up. What kind of news? Kian smiled at his phone, at something on his phone, in that soft way that meant it was about her. Soon, he said, and walked away. Daniel sat very still for a long moment. Then he opened a new document. He did not know what he was going to write. He just needed somewhere to put all the things he could not say out loud. He typed one sentence. I think I am finally going to have to leave. He stared at it. Then he closed the document without saving it. Not yet, but soon. Soon was starting to feel very close. It was a Saturday in early November when Kian Voss got engaged. Daniel knew it was coming. He had, after all, arranged the entire day. The vineyard reservation upstate, the private outdoor terrace, the arrangement with a restaurant manager to have the ring box waiting under the dessert cover. He had even confirmed the weather forecast 3 times to make sure it would not rain. He had planned it so well, he just had not planned what it would feel like to watch it happen. He was not there, of course. He was in the office because Kian had asked him to hold the weekend in case any last minute details needed handling. That was the kind of assistant Daniel was: available, reliable, always there. So he sat at his desk on a Saturday in an empty office and he waited. At 7:14 in the evening, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Kian. She said yes, 3 words. Daniel read them once, then again. Then he set the phone face down on his desk and looked at the ceiling for a very long time. The office was completely silent. Outside the window, the city moved on, indifferent and bright. Cars below, lights blinking, people going somewhere the world had no idea and did not care. Daniel picked up the phone again. He typed, "Congratulations. I am very happy for you." He sent it before he could think too carefully about whether any part of it was true. On Monday morning, Kian came in and looked genuinely different. Not in his appearance. Still the same pressed shirt, same careful hair. But something behind his eyes had settled. Like a question he had been carrying for a long time had finally been answered. He called the whole team together in the main meeting room. 12 people crowded around the long table and announced it simply and cleanly. Most of you will find out through the usual channels, he said, almost dry about it, which made people laugh. But Seo, Rina, and I are engaged. I wanted to tell you all directly. The room filled with noise. Congratulations, applause, someone popping open a small bottle of champagne that appeared from somewhere. Kian smiled properly, genuinely, and shook hands and accepted the noise with a kind of quiet pleasure. Daniel stood near the back of the room and clapped with everyone else. He was very good at this, at standing near the edge of things and making sure no one noticed him. One of his colleagues, Mira from the design team, leaned over and said, "You must have known for ages, right? You know everything about him." Daniel smiled. "He keeps his personal life private." Still, she studied him for a second, curious. "Are you okay? You look a bit pale." "I did not sleep well," Daniel said. "Excuse me." He slipped out before the champagne reached him. He went to the supply room, which was small and dim and smelled like printer paper. He closed the door. He stood in the dark for exactly 3 minutes, breathing slowly, telling himself to get it together. This was not new information. He had known it was coming. He had booked the vineyard. He had ordered the ring box placement. He had done everything except the actual proposing. So why did it feel like something had just fallen out of the floor? He pressed the back of his hand to his mouth. He breathed through his nose. He counted to 10. Then he opened the door, walked back to his desk, and pulled up his email. At the top of his inbox was a message from Kian sent that morning before the announcement, with the subject line, "Thank you." Daniel opened it. "Daniel, I know I have asked a lot of you over the years. Saturday was perfect because of the work you put into it. I mean that. I am not sure this company would function without you. But more than that, I am not sure I would. Thank you for everything. Truly." K. Daniel read it 3 times. Then he opened a new email, addressed to himself, and typed the only words that were fully honest at that moment. "I cannot do this anymore." He did not resign that day, or the next. He spent a week thinking about it with the careful, organized logic that he applied to everything. He made a list of practical concerns, finances, he had savings. He had always been careful, because some quiet part of him had always half known this day would come. References, Kian would give him a glowing one, he was certain of that. Next steps, he had skills. He was not afraid of starting over. The practical side was manageable. The emotional side was harder to file neatly. Because here was the thing Daniel kept coming back to, the thing that sat in his chest and would not move. He did not hate Kian. He could not. Kian had not done anything wrong. He had never made a promise he did not keep. never led Daniel anywhere, never once looked at him the way Daniel had looked at him. Kian was not the villain of this story. He was just a man who did not know, and Daniel had made very sure of that. That was the part that hurt the most. Not the engagement, not Seorina, not even the white roses or the she said yes text. It was the fact that Daniel had spent 4 years choosing silence, and now he would spend the rest of his career, maybe his life, wondering what would have happened if he had chosen differently. He closed his laptop on Friday evening. He stayed at his desk for a long time. Then he opened his drawer and took out a single sheet of paper. He began to write, "Dear Mr. Voss, please accept this letter as my formal resignation. Effective 2 weeks from today," he stopped. He looked at the words. He put his pen down. He went home. He did not sleep. He came back the next morning. He picked up the pen and he finished the letter. The letter sat in Daniel's drawer for 3 days before he gave it to Kian. He had written it cleanly, professional, polite, with 2 weeks' notice, and a thorough offer to help with the transition. He had not put a real reason in it. He had written pursuing other opportunities, which was what people wrote, when the real reason was something they could not explain in a formal document. He read it every morning when he arrived. Then he put it back and went to work. On the third day, Kian asked him to stay after hours to go over the upcoming project proposals. They sat in Kian's office, two chairs pulled to one side of the desk, papers spread between them. The city lit up slowly outside the window as the evening came in. This was something they had done hundreds of times. Just the two of them, working through things, Kian's voice low and focused, Daniel's notes neat and fast. Daniel had always loved this, the quiet closeness of it, being trusted with the hard thinking. He looked at Kian, who was marking something on a diagram with that slight frown he got when the numbers did not sit right. This man had no idea. The thought settled in Daniel's chest like a stone. He has absolutely no idea. What do you think about shifting the timeline on the Meridian site? Kian asked without looking up. Daniel told him his thoughts. Clearly, efficiently, correctly. Kian listened, nodded, made notes. When they finished, Kian leaned back and said, "You are always right about these things." "Not always." "Close enough." He looked at Daniel with something tired but warm in his expression. "I was serious, what I wrote in that email. You have kept this place standing more than once. I hope you know that." Daniel reached into his bag. He took out the letter. He set it on the desk. Kian looked at it, then at Daniel, then back at the letter. He did not pick it up immediately. He just looked at Daniel with a very still expression that was hard to read. "What is this?" he said. It was not quite a question. "My resignation letter." Silence. Kian picked it up. He read it. Daniel watched his eyes move across the page, slow and careful, the way he read everything that mattered. His jaw tightened slightly. That was the only thing that moved. When he finished, he set it down. 2 weeks, Kian said. Yes, other opportunities. Yes. Kian looked at him directly. Is that the real reason? Daniel held his gaze. Does it matter? Yes, Kian said, simply and immediately. It matters to me. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he said very carefully, I need a change. 4 years is a long time. I think it is the right moment. Kian did not look convinced, but he also did not push, which was what Daniel had counted on. Kian was good at reading people, but he had always had a specific blind spot, and that blind spot had a name, and the name was Daniel. I will not stop you if this is what you want, Kian said. His voice had gone a little flat, not cold, just contained. But I want you to know that this company loses something real when you go. Thank you, Daniel said. That is not what Kian stopped. He pressed his lips together. Okay. He picked up the letter and held it for a moment. 2 weeks, he said again. 2 weeks, Daniel confirmed. He picked up his bag. He stood up. He walked to the door. Daniel. He stopped. Are you sure? Kian asked. It was such a quiet question, no pressure in it. Just genuine, plain asking. And that was the hardest thing because it was so like Kian to ask like that, and it was so like Daniel to have memorized every version of Kian's voice. And this one was the soft, worried one that he had heard maybe 6 times in 4 years and had been hoarding ever since. Yes, Daniel said. He walked out. The next 2 weeks were strange in a way Daniel had not expected. He had thought it would feel like a countdown, each day bringing him closer to the exit. Instead, it felt like everything had been turned up slightly louder. like his senses had been sharpened by the knowledge that this was ending. He noticed things, the specific slant of afternoon light through the office windows, the rhythm of the printer down the hall, the particular way Kian drummed his fingers on the desk when he was waiting for a call. He was memorizing it all without meaning to. Kian, for his part, was odd in a way that was hard to name. He was not distant, if anything, he was slightly more present. He stopped by Daniel's desk more often than usual. Not for work things, always, sometimes just to say something small, point out an article he had read, mention a problem he was turning over in his head, like he was stretching the time out. Daniel let him. It was probably the worst thing he could have done for himself, but he let him. On day 11, Myra from design found Daniel in the break room and said, in her direct way, Kian looks terrible. Daniel looked up from his coffee. He looks fine. He looks like someone took something from him. She studied Daniel. You know, in my experience, when a person resigns right after their boss gets engaged. Mira. She raised her hands. I am just saying what I see. Please do not. She was quiet for a moment, then softer. Are you okay? I will be, Daniel said. And for the first time, he actually believed it slightly. She nodded. Good, because you deserve to be. He looked at his coffee. He did not say anything, but something in him, some small, stubborn part, held on to those words and did not let go. The last day arrived the way last days always do, without warning, even when you have been counting down to it. Daniel came in at 7:45. He made Kian's coffee out of habit, and then stopped halfway through and set the cup down. He looked at it for a moment. Then he made it anyway. It was the last one. He could make the last one. He had packed up his desk quietly over the past week, taking small things home a little at a time so it would not look dramatic. Now the desk was nearly clear, a notepad, his computer, a small plant he had brought in 3 years ago and was planning to take home today. The office filled up slowly. People came by his desk all morning, some with cards, some with awkward hugs, some with that look people get when they cannot quite believe something is actually ending. The team from the lower floor sent up a cake, which made Daniel feel strange in a grateful, heavy way. Kian was in meetings most of the morning. Daniel could see him through the glass wall, standing at the whiteboard, marker in hand, turning to face someone, focused, in his element. Daniel did his work. He wrote careful notes for whoever would take over. He organized every file, every contact, every ongoing task into a folder labeled Transition, which he left on the shared drive with a brief email to the office manager. He was very good at this. He had always been very good at endings that looked like logistics. At 2 in the afternoon, Kian came out of his last meeting, saw the state of Daniel's desk, and stopped walking. He looked at the cleared surface, the small plant sitting in a tote bag, the neat stack of transition documents. Then he looked at Daniel. You are really going, Kian said. I really am. Something moved in Kian's expression, fast, there and gone. Daniel had learned to catch those flickers over 4 years. This one looked very briefly like panic. Come into my office, Kian said. Daniel followed him in. Kian closed the door. He did not sit. He stood by the window, with his arms crossed, which was what he did when he was working something out, and had not found the words yet. I want to ask you something, Kian said. Okay, and I want you to be honest with me. Daniel kept his face still. I will try. Kian turned from the window. His eyes were direct. Did I do something wrong? Did this company do something wrong? Because if there is this reason, a real reason, I would rather know. Daniel was quiet for a moment. No, he said. You were a very good employer, Kian. I mean that. Then why? I told you. I need a change. 4 years is not that long. For some people it is. Kian looked at him. Really looked. In that way he rarely did. Like he was trying to find something he had misplaced. I feel like I am missing something, Kian said. I feel like there is a piece of this that you are not telling me. Daniel picked up his bag. He looked at Kian, and for one single terrifying moment, he thought about saying it. All of it. The coffee orders and the memorized laughs. The list he had made with, because I am disappearing at the top. The 4 years of standing close and saying nothing. All of it. He looked at Kian's face. He thought about Seorina. He thought about, she said yes. He thought about what telling the truth now would accomplish. It would not undo anything. It would not change anything. It would only make Kian feel terrible, and it would take away the one clean thing Daniel had left. His exit. There is no peace, Daniel said. I promise. Kian stared at him. Then slowly, he nodded. All right. He extended his hand. Daniel shook it. Kian's grip was firm and held a beat too long before it let go. You can always call me, Kian said. If you need anything. References, contacts, anything. I know. Thank you. Daniel picked up the plant. He walked to the door. Daniel, Kian said one more time. Daniel stopped. He did not turn around. Take care of yourself, Kian said, quietly. Please. Daniel closed his eyes for 1 second. You too, he said. He walked out of the office. He walked to the elevator. He pressed the button. He watched the doors open. He stepped inside. And this time, when the doors closed behind him, the question he had asked himself weeks ago in this same elevator, what would happen if I just stopped? Finally had the beginning of an answer. He did not know where he was going. He did not know what came next. He was 30 years old and starting over with a bag of personal items and a small plant and 4 years of love that had never found a home. But he was moving, and moving, he told himself, was enough for now. The lobby of the Voss Architecture building was busy at 3 in the afternoon. Couriers, clients, staff. Daniel passed through it all and pushed open the front door. The November air was cold and clean. He took one breath, then he walked. He did not look back. That was the hardest thing he had ever done. And he did it. The first week without Kian was the strangest of Daniel's life. He woke up at 7 every morning out of habit, then remembered. He reached for his phone to check work emails, then remembered. He started making a second cup of coffee before he caught himself. Muscle memory is a slow thing to undo. He had sublet a small apartment across the city while he figured things out. It was nothing like his old place, smaller, with one window that looked into another building and a kitchen the size of a large closet. But it was quiet and it was his, and there was no one in it whose feelings he needed to arrange himself around. He spent the first week doing nothing productive and letting himself feel that. He cooked things he had never had time to cook before. He read books he kept starting and never finishing. He called his younger sister for the first time in months and talked for 2 hours about nothing in particular. And she said at the end, You sound different. And he said, Good different or bad different? And she said, Lighter, like something put you down. He thought about that for a long time after. He found a new job in the third week. It came through a former colleague, a small design consultancy looking for an operations manager. Less prestige than Voss architecture, significantly less stress. The kind of place where people ate lunch together and left at 5. Daniel said yes before he finished reading the offer letter. He started on a Monday. His new office smelled like coffee and old wood, and had a window that faced a small courtyard where pigeons gathered at noon. His new boss, a woman named Cho Hai-jin, who was extremely organized and extremely kind, shook his hand and said, We have heard very good things about you. Daniel smiled. I will try to be useful. We do not use that word here, she said pleasantly. You are a person, not a tool. Just do good work and go home on time. Daniel blinked. He went home on time that day for the first time in 4 years. He sat on his small balcony in the evening air and ate a meal he had cooked himself and did not check his phone. It was, he realized, a very peaceful feeling. Unfamiliar, but peaceful. He did not think about Kian. He told himself this firmly every morning. He was very disciplined about it. He thought about Kian constantly, not in the sharp, painful way of the first days, more like the way you notice a bruise. You do not always feel it, but when you press in the right place, it is still there. He heard from Mira 2 weeks in. She texted to say she missed having him around, and that the new assistant had already reorganized the filing system, and everyone was upset about it. He laughed at that, genuinely, for the first time in a while. He did not ask about Kian. Mira did not mention him. Then, at the end of the month, a message came. It was from an unknown number. He almost did not open it. This is Kian. I got a new phone. I hope you are well. Truly, Daniel stared at it. He put his phone down. He picked it back up. He typed, I am well, thank you. He stared at what he had written. Then, before he could stop himself, he added, How are you? He sent it. He put the phone across the room. He went to brush his teeth. He told himself not to care what the response was. He came back and checked the phone immediately. Honest answer? Strange. The office is not the same. But I think that is something I needed to learn. Daniel sat down on the edge of his bed. What did you need to learn? He wrote. A pause. Longer than the others. Then, that I was relying on you for more than work, and that it was not fair to you. Daniel read that 3 times. His chest did a complicated thing. He did not know how to respond to that. He sat with it for a long time. The message glowing on his phone screen, the city sounds coming through the window, the pigeons on the balcony railing outside. Finally, he typed, "It is okay. I stayed because I wanted to." Another pause. "Why did you really leave, Daniel?" And there it was again, that question. The same question, reaching through a new phone number and 6 weeks of silence to find him in his small apartment across the city. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. He thought about honesty, about what it would cost, about what Mira had said, "You deserve to be okay," about his sister saying, "Lighter," like something put you down. He thought about Rena. He thought about the engagement. He typed, "Because I cared about you in a way that was not good for me, and I needed to take care of myself." He put the phone down. He did not sleep well. But in the morning, when he checked the screen, Kian had replied, "Thank you for telling me. Can I call you?" Daniel closed his eyes. He thought for a long moment, then he typed back, "Yes." Kian called at 8 o'clock that evening. Daniel had spent the entire day preparing himself. He had told himself very firmly what this call was: a conversation between two professional adults, a closing of a chapter, nothing more. He answered on the second ring. "Hi," Kian said. "Hi," Daniel said. There was a small silence, not uncomfortable exactly, more like both of them standing on opposite sides of a door, deciding whether to open it. "I have been thinking about what you wrote," Kian said, "about caring in a way that was not good for you." "Kian, let me say this." His voice was quiet but steady. "I have been going over 4 years in my head, and I keep finding things, small things, that I did not understand at the time." Daniel sat very still on his couch. "I was not a fair person to you," Kian said. "Not because I meant to be unfair, but because I was careless. I took your time and your effort, and I gave you my trust and my professional respect, and I told myself that was enough, and I do not think it was." "You did not owe me anything else," Daniel said. "I knew what the job was. Did you?" Kian's voice had something careful in it. "Or did you stay because you were hoping for something I was not offering?" Daniel opened his mouth, closed it. "You do not have to answer that," Kian said. "I was not hoping," Daniel said. "I was just existing near you." "It sounds pathetic." "It does not sound pathetic," Kian said immediately. "It sounds like something that must have been exhausting." Daniel laughed, brief and a little ragged. "It was." "Daniel, what?" "I ended the engagement." The world stopped for a moment. Daniel said nothing. He was not sure he could. "3 nights ago," Kian said. "Before I got the new phone, before I messaged you, I ended it." "Why?" Daniel said. It came out barely above a whisper, a long pause. "Because I was building a life with someone who was right in every reasonable way," Kian said slowly. "And the whole time, something in me kept asking a different question." "What question?" Daniel said. Another pause. Longer. Like Kian was holding the words, checking their weight before letting them go. "Whether the person I actually wanted to come home to had just walked out of my office building with a plant under his arm." Daniel pressed a hand over his eyes. He sat in his small apartment with the city outside his window and 4 years of everything pressing against the inside of his chest. And he breathed. "You cannot say that to me," Daniel said finally. "I know it is not fair timing. It is terrible timing. I know." "Kian." Daniel stood up. He walked to the window. He looked out at the city. "You just got out of an engagement. You do not know what you want right now. You are probably just..." "Daniel." Kian's voice was quiet and very direct. "I have been thinking about this for longer than 3 weeks. I am not confused. I am late. Those are different things." Daniel pressed his forehead against the cool glass. "Why did you never say anything?" he said. "If you felt something." "Because I did not know what it was until you left." A pause. "That is not an excuse. It is just the truth. Some people need something to be gone before they understand what it was." Daniel thought about 4 years, about coffee orders and late nights and small laughs, and all the things he had been holding quietly, alone. "I am not the same person I was when I was your assistant," Daniel said. "I know," Kian said. "I am not asking for that person. I am asking if I can take you to dinner. Just dinner. No pressure, no expectations. Just let me see you. Let me try." Daniel turned from the window. He looked at his small apartment. The plant on the windowsill, the one he had taken from his desk on the last day, had grown 2 new leaves since he brought it home. He had not expected it to survive the move. It had done better than expected, he thought. Maybe things can grow in new places. One dinner, Daniel said. One dinner, Kian agreed quietly. And if it is awkward, if it is terrible, we will both pretend it never happened and go back to our separate lives, Kian said. There was a small smile in his voice. Daniel recognized it even through a phone. Daniel closed his eyes. Fine, he said. Friday? Friday. I will send the details. Do not send me a whole itinerary. Only a small one. Kian, very small. And there it was, that laugh. The real one. Surprised out of him, warm and genuine. Daniel, against everything, smiled. After they hung up, he sat on his couch for a very long time. He did not know what to feel. There was too much at once. Hope and fear and the specific terror of wanting something again after you had worked so hard to stop. But underneath all of it, something was very quietly and stubbornly alive. He looked at the plant on his windowsill. Okay, he said to no one in particular. Friday. Friday came cold and clear, with a sky so blue it looked painted. Daniel changed his outfit 3 times, which was not like him. He was a decisive person. He had been standing in front of his small closet for 40 minutes and had tried on a gray sweater, a navy shirt, and a jacket he had bought 2 years ago and never worn. He stood in his kitchen looking at himself in the window reflection and said, out loud, "You are being ridiculous." He wore the jacket. Kian had sent the restaurant address with no other details, which Daniel respected. He had also sent a second message 2 hours later, saying, I am nervous, which was the most unexpectedly honest thing Kian had ever said to him in 4 years and some weeks. Daniel had stared at that message for a long time. Then he wrote back, so am I. See you at 7. The restaurant was a small place near the river. Not flashy, not trying too hard. Warm inside, with low lights and a menu written on a chalkboard. The kind of place where the tables were close together and the noise from other conversations wrapped around you like a blanket. Kian was already there when Daniel arrived. He was sitting at a corner table, and he stood up when he saw Daniel come in, which was a thing he had never done in 4 years of professional interaction. And Daniel felt that standing up very directly in his chest. Hi, Kian said. Hi, Daniel said. They looked at each other. You look different, Kian said. Different how? Like yourself, Kian said. Simple and plain. Daniel sat down. He picked up the menu. He told himself to breathe. The beginning was a little careful. They talked around the edges of things, the new job, the city, a building project Kian was working on that had a complicated brief. It was not awkward exactly, more like two people relearning the distance between with them without the desk in the way. But then the food arrived and something loosened. Kian said something quietly funny about the architect who had designed the restaurant. And Daniel laughed, and Kian looked at him when he laughed, with an expression that was open in a way Daniel was not used to seeing on him. What? Daniel said. Nothing, Kian said. I missed that. Missed what? The way you laugh. He said it simply, looking down at his plate. I did not realize how often I tried to make you laugh until you were not there to laugh at things. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Kian, he said. I know, too much too fast. I am working on that. No, Daniel said. That is not what I was going to say. Kian looked up. Daniel folded his hands on the table. He thought about 4 years. He thought about the letter he had written to himself, the one that started with, because I am disappearing. He thought about his sister saying, lighter. He thought about the plant with 2 new leaves. I was in love with you, Daniel said. For most of the time I worked for you. I want you to know that, not as something that asks for anything from you, just as the truth, because I spent a long time not saying true things, and I am trying to stop doing that. Kian was very still. I know it makes things complicated, Daniel continued. I know we are both different now than we were then. I know this dinner might be one dinner and nothing else, and that is okay. But I did not want to sit here and pretend I did not feel what I felt. That is not who I want to be anymore. A long pause. Kian reached across the table. He placed his hand over Daniel's folded hands. His touch was careful, like he was aware of what it meant. I am sorry I did not see it, Kian said. I am sorry I was not paying the right kind of attention. You did not know. I should have known. He pressed his fingers slightly. And for what it is worth, When you left, the thing I kept thinking was not about the work. It was not about the office. It was about you specifically, about not knowing how you were doing, about whether you were eating lunch, which I realize sounds strange now that I am saying it out loud. Daniel laughed, a little unsteadily. That does not sound strange, Daniel said. I like you, Kian said. Not as an employee, not as a history, as you. Right now, here, in that jacket. I want to find out who you are when you are not working for me. He paused. If you will let me. Daniel looked at this man, this careful, focused, occasionally oblivious man who had taken 4 years to see something that had been right in front of him. He thought, this is probably going to be complicated. There would be things to untangle, the power gap, the history, the engagement that had ended, the versions of each other they had carried and would have to set down, he thought. It is also possible that complicated things are worth it. One condition, Daniel said. Name it. You make your own coffee from now on. Kian stared at him. Then he laughed. That real laugh, the one that had been memorized and kept and taken out on difficult days for 4 years. Deal, Kian said. Daniel turned his hand over, slowly, and let his fingers rest against Kian's palm. Outside, the river moved past in the dark, easy and unhurried. Inside, the other conversations continued, and the warm lights stayed low, and neither of them moved to check the time. They talked for 3 hours, about real things, about what they wanted, about the people they had been and the people they were trying to become, about architecture and books and the small plant on Daniel's windowsill, about all the things that had lived quietly under 4 years of professional distance and were now, slowly, carefully, being let out into the open. When they finally left, standing on the pavement outside the restaurant, the cold air sharp around them, Kian said, Can I see you next Friday? Daniel looked at him. Yes, he said, and it was the most freely he had ever said yes to anything.